Hey, Sean. Hey, David.
Hey,
Okay, cool. Hey, Sean, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Trying to get my camera on here. There we go.
Cool. Awesome. Did my screen share work?
yes, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So Sean, just to kind of give you an idea of what me and David were doing yesterday, or just to kind of give you some background first, we have an investor lined up who wants to buy a portion of the franchise entity only. So not the corporate stores that I own, so not Costa Oils Inc., just the franchisor. But part of his deal is he needs to be assured that the stores that I own will be able to pay a royalty because my stores will become franchise locations. And so that royalty is a 6% on gross revenue number. And so on 3 million, we're talking about, nearly 200 grand worth of revenue, something like that. So me and David created this P&L because he asked us to strip out all of the franchise expenses, like anything to do with the franchise. He basically, because I've taken on a lot of debt in order to build out the franchise business and in order to build out the franchise office. So we have employees that are on Costa Oils Inc. payroll who are really franchise employees. We have expenses that are really franchise expenses. So he asked me and David to just strip everything out and put together a P&L. So we actually did this document right here, which is about 12,000 transactions. And me and David for 5 hours went through it and just like ripped it apart, took everything out. And I thought we got it to a decent place.
Okay.
But he wasn't happy with it. So I'll let David kind of take over from here because I want to make sure we get him what he wants.
So I think ultimately what it came down to was, the investor he wants to see like basically at least 200,000 to 300,000 in revenue to know that there is
profit
the ability,
and net income,
right? Yeah, in profit, to be able to absorb that royalty fee that Costa is going to pay out of the corporate store. So the thing that we did with, Costa, is there a way I can?
I'm gonna see if I can give you.
Okay. So on the, when we exported everything into this Google sheet, I mean, we didn't want to touch like actual QuickBooks. If you're working on it, we don't want to like start have you come back and look at it and be like, well, everything's different here. But what I had done over the course of last year, just trying to get everything caught up, there's a lot of things that are in repairs and maintenance that I guess I didn't realize were going towards like the build out of a new store.
Okay.
And so, we think we have quite a few startup costs there, capital expenditures. And so he wanted to see, he was like, no, you got to get all those on the balance sheet and all that. And so I think the biggest thing that we wanted to talk with you about is what do we strip out of the P&L and take over the balance sheet in terms of starting up new locations, number one, just for accuracy, but then also for the purposes of
closing this transaction.
Yeah, it's going to make the P&L look more profitable. I mean, obviously we want it to be accurate, but what parts of those, like, is it just the construction or like, Costa brought up, like if
initial
you buy
inventory,
bulk oil, beforehand, is that going to go towards like the basis of a new store? And so kind of some guidance on everything that we can take off the profit and loss and move over to the balance sheet.
I'd say we should come up with some sort of capitalization policy, if you will. Usually it's a dollar threshold, and anything over that threshold would be capitalized and put on the balance sheet. That way we're consistent, and there's not necessarily a question when it comes time to, as you're working through things, David, it's not like you have to come back every single time and
Right.
ask that question. I most commonly see, because it's a threshold that the IRS has kind of thrown out there, a $2,500 threshold.
Okay.
That's not to say that that's what we have to use, but it's a good ballpark figure to start with. And the reason I say that is because the IRS, if you make an election on your return, which we do for every return we file, says that they're not even going to look at anything less than that dollar figure for purposes of whether or not it should have been capitalized. So I think that's a safe number if we want to use that one. In terms of kind of your startup costs, I don't know that oil is something I would add unless you want to put it like in inventory or something like that, because you're going to use it up pretty quickly, I would guess.
Yeah.
So you could, if you had a way of estimating how much inventory you kind of had at any given time across the stores, that would be something we could put on the balance sheet and adjust it either monthly or quarterly or even just annually. But that would move some expenses off of the P&L and onto the balance sheet.
Yeah, between oil and filters, it's about $15,000 per store at any given time.
Okay.
Plus minus $5,000.
Sure. So I don't know that there's any inventory on the balance sheet right now. Is that, let me see here.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So
David, you do have control of the screen, I think.
Okay. All right, thanks.
yeah, I don't really see anything sitting on the balance sheet at this exact moment. But that's something we could strip out of cost of goods sold and move to the balance sheet. That if you're doing 15,000 a store, or you want to come up with some other mechanism for estimating that, then that's a pretty substantial impact to the P&L.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that's going to make a pretty big dent, I think, right there, just with those couple of items. Now, the other thing that was brought up is not necessarily, it's not as important, I don't think, to this exercise, but he kind of got a little argumentative about like when the franchise fee revenue stuff is recognized. And we're doing that all like when it's actually, when the money just flows in, right? Is that what you?
Yeah, I think that there might be an argument for like GAAP purposes, which we're not overly concerned with in my mind at this moment. We're not doing any sort of GAAP financial statements to recognize that over time. But for tax purposes, there's no carve out necessarily to say that you can defer any of that revenue. It's cash in, it's revenue.
Okay. All right. I don't know.
David, I'm not too worried about COII right now. I just
Yeah.
want to take care of this COI P&L so we can close on this traction. If Abdi wants to pay his, $800 an hour franchise lawyer to go through COII and rip it apart, let him take care of that.
Yeah.
For right now, I just want to, do what he asked with this P&L, get this transaction closed, get the money to get this debt off our books, and free up our business to not be suffocated.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be I think those two things right there is, you know, if we move oil to inventory and go
David,
through.
real quick, I'm going to take over real quick before you get into that. I did change the title of this from
Okay.
COII reimbursement to management fees.
Okay.
And then also I started going through, you know, the sales. I couldn't figure out a way to do it more than one transaction at a time, but all of the ATM deposits that are left in sales do need to be moved to cash, because this represents cash deposits in this. All of these deposits are the cash.
Okay, I'll handle those.
And then lastly, I did go into I think it was uncategorized. I think all the rent is correct. So David, if you remember yesterday, our rent for 2022 was showing like 270,000.
Mhm.
And now, after I've added all of those transactions that you and I identified that were actually rent, it's up to 350. So this is a more accurate representation of rent. There's still quite a bit in uncategorized, and I think a lot of it might have been those. Actually, no, these are all. So these are the ones that we didn't get the check images for because they were drawn on the 5992 account that's closed, and so PNC would have to. I'd have to get an act of Congress for them to send me those check images. But the other one, Sean, that the investor was asking about was we have substantial. It's not substantial. Well, it's substantial in the sense that it's thousands of dollars, but like all of these Menards and Lowe's, like those are not places that we would get stuff on a regular basis in the due course of running an oil change business. So these are all, we opened 4 new locations in 2022. And so anything that's Lowe's, Menards, 1-800 got junk, you know, probably hauling away stuff left behind by the previous tenant. He was telling us that these should all be moved to the balance sheet.
I'm okay moving them to the balance sheet. I don't know that they need to be, but it's certain they can be, certainly.
Okay.
Ideally, we'd have a way of kind of summarizing maybe like by location kind of the costs so that we could say that these costs are associated with this store and have them kind of on a fixed asset listing so that we have kind of a historical record of what we're depreciating.
Yeah.
I know that that's
it'll only be tough because 2 of the stores were open literally within weeks of each other and within 5 miles of each other. So we probably used the same Menards, the same Lowe's, the same Walmart to build those 2 stores out. And then one of the stores was in Cleveland and it was at a later date. So it shouldn't be super hard to pin these, but like Moline, Illinois, this could be either the Milan store or the Moline store. All of these Molines, these are all the build out of that store, which ironically enough, Sean, I spent all that money building that store out, and this is what it looks like right now. Oh, hold on one second. I made this building look beautiful. And I don't know why it's not coming up. Oh, here we go.
oh my goodness.
It was New Year's Eve, 2 in the morning. Well, I guess technically New Year's Day because it was 2 in the morning. And my insurance company is just absolutely giving me the hardest time. The store is still closed. And it's been tough. I don't know why I tried to play this video. Obviously this website doesn't want to play ball, but you get the gist of it. There's a car through our building.
Wow. Well, hopefully you have some luck with the insurance there. I mean, that's crazy.
We had to get a public adjuster, so it's kind of out of my hands now.
Yeah.
All right, David. I don't have anything else for Sean. It sounds like he's kind of answered exactly what we need to do what Abdi's asking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think those were the biggest categories where we thought we could make a difference for the purposes of what he's looking for. So, I mean, now we just gotta actually do that. I feel like,
There's
but-
some substantial numbers in the auto repairs and maintenance as well. I don't know if any of those could be capitalized, but just a thought.
okay.
I think, David, we could probably disregard this sheet at this point and probably just go do what needs to be done within QuickBooks Online, export a new one, and then kind of redo what we did by removing the franchise expenses. And I can take care of that, David. We don't need to get on a call again, but like, if you can get the QuickBooks side where it needs to be and then export it, then I'll go through each item and I'll remove the franchise related ones and we'll get that, I'll get that and then I might just need to ask you to collapse it into the one page because he doesn't want to see all this.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I mean, Sean, are you okay if I make changes within 2022 QuickBooks?
Yeah, I have not spent a ton of time in COIs
Okay.
for 22, so go ahead and do what you want to do there. I have spent a little bit more time on the COI side of things. So if you need to change something, go ahead, but just let me know on that front. I was scrolling down through the P&L to see if there's anything else. What all is in legal and professional services? There's some big numbers in there that.
Yeah, so those are largely franchise expenses.
Okay. Like what's Inc. File?
So Inc. File is the resident agent that
Okay.
that maintains the corporation in Gettysburg, in Delaware.
Fine.
Fran Devco is the franchise development company that maintains our documents for franchising and also maintains our sales.
Okay.
Shipe Dosick is our franchise attorney. Harris Beach is our trademark attorney. So really, of this, the only expenses that would have been COI expenses is Barley Snyder, who was my personal attorney. The rest of these would have all been COII expenses, with the exception of Timothy Meisner. And I was telling David this $51,000 was the purchase of a business in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. They just made me wire it to their lawyer, and then he dispersed the funds to the owner of the business. So that 51,000 was the purchase of a new location. And then Ryan Ellis LLC is advertising and marketing.
That purchase of a new location probably should be on the balance sheet.
We didn't take ownership of the business until January 1st, if that matters, of 23.
I'd still probably move it and call it a deposit then until you actually can place it in service. I mean, that's a $51,000 impact right there.
Okay.
Eisenhart and Company, those guys, Profits LLC, those yokels.
I think a lot of those other expenses are good to be period expenses, but the purchase it's COI purchased, right?
Yes, COI it operates as a COI location.
Then yeah, I would definitely move that 51,000 to the balance sheet as.
Yeah,
whatever the-
fortunately, COII doesn't do anything other than license franchising. So they're like, it's very obvious when something is an oil change related expense versus a franchising expense.
Yeah.
Despite all the commingling.
I guess like, moving forward, Sean, like in the future, like if we have things like this where it's, the COIs, if they pay Fran Devco and it's a COII expense, how do you want me to handle that in QuickBooks?
Well, David, when this transaction closes and Abdi owns the majority of the
That kind of
stuff,
will
yeah,
be-
it's gonna be a moot point because all of the franchise employers are going to be moved off of COI's books.
yeah,
All of the COII expenses are going to be moved over to the new entity that Abdi's creating. So COII in essence is going to not have any, it's not going to collect royalties. It's not going to have any expenses. The office that I'm in is going to be rented by COI instead of COII. And then Abdi's going to pay me rent. So I think that it's kind of a moot point going forward, as long as we can close this transaction.
Okay.
Okay, great. I think that's everything that I had. That's all the
Okay.
questions I had. So
Cool.
thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Super helpful.
Glad I could help.
Cool. I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Yeah, you guys have a good one, okay?
See ya.
Okay, you too.
Yeah.
David, you good?
Yeah.
Cool. I'll talk to you later too.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Hi, this is Costa. Yes, yes, it is.